Hello, Jesus. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first of hopefully many future live stream discussion, review, breakdowns of games, what I have been playing recently. So, Resident Evil 9 released fairly recently and blew me away. A rare 10 out of 10. Like Psychonauts 2 before it. Hold on, there should be audio playing. I don't usually give out a lot of 10 out of 10s in today's gaming landscape because, at least not in the AAA scene, because I find that a lot of these games, and this may have something to do with the insane push to graphical fidelity, but a lot of these games have seemingly reduced interactivity in order to not break presentation, or they're just out and out not interesting to me. So, Resident Evil, I'm a fan of the series. I've recently been streaming a lot of the older titles. My credentials for talking about this is I've played the original trilogy, played 4 many times, played all the remakes, and all of the new ones too, so I'm versed. I'm not incredibly, I haven't played all of them, but I know kind of what we're talking about here. And I was kind of hyped for this one, so seeing it be as successul as it was, commercially, critically, it was great. Took a lot of. It was really happy to see because we've been living through this just stream of garbage live service games, unending, unyielding, for the past decade or so, and to see a classic legacy franchise, single player focused game like this one just nail it out of the park. I was so happy about that. Now, the way I'm gonna format this, I have a little bit of a dossier here. We're gonna start by talking just briefly about the gameplay, about story elements, but not really go into spoilers because some of you have still not beaten it, even though you should have beaten it the day it came out, like us normal people. And then we'll clearly mark off when spoilers begin. And I also have, this is a playthrough I did of the game over the past couple of days. So we're going to be having that audio just playing while we talk about this. Gonna also just be fast forwarding over it. At points we maybe talk about something relevant to what is going on in the actual sequence, but
I won't force you to go.
I'm basically going to be going off the notes, and we'll see how we go. So, just the verdict. Like I said, I think this game is a 10 out of 10. I think it has dips in quality, which we'll talk about. I think it backpedals on some things that the franchise actually used to be better at, I feel like. But there is so much quality packed in there that I couldn't give it anything less than a 10 out of 10. As for whom I would recommend this game to, I think this actually straddles a really interesting line of, if you like these, I guess, Sony games, these cinematic third-person action games, cutscene bloat, you could do worse than to play this one. But I really think if you are an older school gamer, somebody who maybe enjoys gameplay a bit more, this is for you. It's such a treat because we don't get a lot of games that are like this anymore. So yeah, I guess a little bit of a background into the series' history and stylings. Resident Evil is not really a zombie franchise. The Japanese title of the franchise is Biohazard, and that's a much more apt name for it, I guess, because it really hits on the core conceit of the series as being about the horrors of biological mutations rather than zombies. Zombies are the classic form it takes, but it's not exclusively that. It's a bio-horror franchise, more like a mix of The Evil Dead and John Carpenter's The Thing. But so as the series has evolved, it has retained the fundamentals of its presentation. The horror is still operating largely on the rules established back in the first game, and the action is still operating on the rules established in the fourth game, which adapted that old system for the movable camera. But I feel like whenever they go back into the minds to further realize their creative ambitions for newer titles, it's always the horror where they make massive leaps and breakthroughs, and the action comparatively just moves sort of laterally. So, fighting here, not better than in Resident Evil 4 Remake. It's not really worse, it's just slightly differently tuned to account for the different sensibilities of the game and needs. But the horror is, I would say, much, much, much better in many parts than the best they've been doing in their recent games. So, I don't know, Chad, does that make sense? Moving forwards, maybe we double back in on the horror, because I guess, no, let's push that back a little. I'm sorry if my thoughts are a bit disjointed here. I'm managing a stream, I have the footage playing, and I'm looking at my notes at the same time. So, the game begins fairly innocently enough. Grace Ashcroft, sent by the FBI to investigate murders in a hotel where her mother was killed way back when. She has a flashback, she meets the game's first villain. We don't want to get too spoilery with that, in Victor Gideon. You have it happen around... where is it? Yeah, here's a flashback where her mom is being killed. Here, there's the policeman we were just talking to. He turns into a zombie because Gideon shot him. And here is Grace meeting with Gideon. The opening to this game is fairly linear, and this is a problem I've had with all of the recent batch of Resident Evil games. If you play the original games, there's usually a big sort of scripted initial meeting of the threat. So in Resident Evil 1, you have the classic zombie looks over the shoulder and you run away, and then he comes and chases you and Barry shoots him down. In Resident Evil 2, you have...
but after much effort...
You really just have, the opening track into the police station, and then you're more or less free to start exploring immediately from memory. Resident Evil 3, you have to...
I'm the one that brought you here.
Oh god, does Resident Evil 3... Now I'm not fully remembering. I think once you go through the Kendo gun shop, you finish all of that sequence, then the game really just opens up right away. But for the newer games, and this may be owing to the cinematic presentation, the openings take much longer, and I don't think that's a great thing, because the meat of the game really is in the dynamic and expressive gameplay, which is really lacking in that. So the opening for this game, you play Grace Ashcroft, and it's a 5-minute sequence or whatever. You're just exploring the hotel until you've hit all the script triggers, open up the locks, and there's a correct order in which to do things. There's some things you can explore, some flavor text to give tone setting for the happenings. But the problem I have with this is right here. Once Gideon captures you, you get to the Leon section. And it's also fairly linear. You're just shooting zombies while Leon chases Gideon. Then you get to the Grace section again. And this section is actually the best of the 4 openings the game has because of that. Because it has an actual horror motif to it. This is the sister. It's one of the sort of patrolling, haunting enemies. It's a good one, and I'll talk more about this when those enemies become relevant, but there's a lot more dynamic things to them. So this one, for example, will break down a wall. If you try to route past her, there's a barricade that you can crouch under, and if she notices you while you're under there, she'll just knock it over. If you're in a room where you have to get the screwdriver, I believe, there is a desk or a table on wheels that she'll push to try to hit you with. There's just they interact so much more with their environments than they did in previous titles, and that's such a wonderful step up for these sorts of hunter enemies. In general, I think all of the enemies are really, really worth noting, really improved all of their dynamic functions, and we'll get to that. But so yeah, this is the third of these sort of linear openings to the game, and there's one more in Leon, when Leon has to start killing the doctors and goes to rescue Grace. This is one of my favorite things in the game, and they front-load it very cleverly, but it's this chainsaw. Notice, she's thrown the chainsaw. Actually, I might be dying in this gameplay sequence, but the chainsaw is so interesting as another one of these dynamic threats in the environment. Enemies can pick it up, they can use it against you, you can pick it up, you can kill enemies fairly quickly with it. But you know, this guy I'm shooting at right now, if I kill him, he may not let go of the chainsaw. And since it's still active, it'll be dragging him around, see right there, like a fish on a hook, and this is so cool. And the problem I have is that Leon's gameplay does not have that explosive amount of expressive emergence that you see in the Grace sections. And that's really sad to see, because that's kind of what made Resident Evil 4 the greatest action game of its era. Was just how much you could, like how much meat you could get out of that. But yeah, so I'm gonna probably die many times. Here's something else I do. And maybe this is a shameful thing, but the aim assist, I think, is pretty crucial to these games. And I kind of came to that conclusion when I was playing Resident Evil 2 Remake, because I think the experience of making choices and acting under uncertainty, planning out the routes, the resource management, I think that's where these games really get the best, you know, you get the bang for your buck playing these games. Aiming is not really a choice. Aiming is an execution challenge. And I think the only way in which it feeds interestingly back into the survival horror is in... maybe it's different from mouse and keyboard, I was playing on a controller here. I think the only way it really feeds back into the survival horror is you happen to miss a lot, and so you need more resources. But having the auto-aim on, it sort of, you know, it overcomes the shortcomings of this presentation format. Didn't used to be as big a problem. I think Resident Evil 4, for example, plays very well without auto-aim on controller, but that's because Leon is stationary and enemies are slow and sluggish moving towards you. Just feels a lot smoother. This is just an iteration of the Resident Evil 4 Remake combat, and I don't think it's as strong as what we had in the fourth game. It's kind of been watered down to just be more conventional third-person action gameplay, but it's still good. It's still very, very refined, so we have a lot of fun with it. But yeah, so this is the fourth of the openings to the game, and it's not until this is done, and notice we're an hour in here, that we finally get to the game you want to be playing. This is the Spencer Mansion. This is the RPD. This is, you know, this is the Baker Estate. This is my favorite thing that the Resident Evil games do. You're just in a large location and you gradually unlock it. You open up all the routes and the shortcuts, and it's just this intricate puzzle box, and you can sort of sequence shift some scenarios. You can move things around in a different order, and you have to act under differing amounts of certainty and uncertainty. So, famously in Resident Evil 2 Remake, you go to the operations room and there's a window on the top of the wall that you can jump through, and it'll land you... It's where you land to see the zombie who's banging on the vending machine. The consumer zombie, who also appears in this game again. It's really funny. Spoiler alert, I guess, but, you know, I'm assuming everybody's watched the trailers, so... But yeah, you jump out of that window and you don't know, like, you don't have a path of retreat, and you also don't know what's in front of you. And I think that sort of dance of acting under, making choices to how you're going to route around an environment that you don't have a perfect degree of certainty about its dynamic little elements. So enemy placements, what rooms are where. All of that, I think, is where the Resident Evil package is truly at its peak. And the action game, that stuff, I think, it's fun. You can enjoy yourself a lot with it, but I think it is an inferior package to this. So I had actually thought Resident Evil 8, I thought I had liked that game more than Resident Evil 7. On a revisit, I'm like, nah, you know what? Resident Evil 7 better than Resident Evil 8, in my opinion. So, seeing them glue both that game and the action game together in this one, I think is interesting. And initially, I felt the Leon sequences were really, really short. He does own the majority of the back end of the game, but moments in the story are broken up in the Grace section so that you have moments to play as Leon. He'll route around the same environment, and it's actually really fun how the choices you make as Leon and as Grace, they actually reverberate. So when you play Leon, after he begins moving around the place, you can just clear out every enemy, all the Crimson Heads and all of that. You can just mow them all down, and then when you come back as Grace from the basement sequence, all the enemies are gone. And that's sort of great. I would have really liked to see maybe a game more focused on that. So that sort of interplay, as is the routes, they come together and then they sort of split apart really hard at the end before kind of coming together again, but you know, not really. But yeah, so the combat in this game, it is still pretty good. Leon has an axe this time around, and it's really fun. Whenever you swing it, his hair goes crazy wild, flails around. And yeah, that I already talked about the sequence at the start with the chainsaw. That might be, you know, we have the Essays and Espresso Game of the Year awards here that I do sometimes. And a recent category we added was Best New Thing You Saw in a Game. That chainsaw just flipping around, rotating on the ground, just an area hazard for everyone and everything around it. Leon will like jab it into an enemy, kill him, and then the enemy will fall on their back, the chainsaw will shoot back out, and it'll become an active component of the dynamic combat challenge again. All of that stuff is really, really beautiful. I think the parry they gave Leon is... I think it's interesting. I think it's, you know, parry systems they get a bad rap. People shit on parry systems nowadays because they are included in so many different games. And I kind of get it, but, you know, because oftentimes they feel like a crutch games will use in lieu of having more interesting systems. But for what this game is going for, I don't really mind it. I think that, again, I think the problem I have with the game really just comes down to how unexpressive I feel Leon's gameplay is. But, for example, stuff like this, I guess this is a good time to talk about enemy design. This game has probably the best enemy design in the entire Resident Evil license. So, going back to the very, very first game, you think, like, what's the iconic Resident Evil enemy? It's the zombie. Then you get to Resident Evil 2. What's the iconic Resident Evil enemy in that one? It's probably the Lickers. Then in the third game, it's Nemesis. In Resident Evil Remake, you know, it's the remake of the original, which had the zombie, so there you get, like, the Crimson Heads. You know, it's just the zombie again, but you evolve it. And Resident Evil 4, I would say the Las Plagas themselves, so being able to just burst out of the heads of enemies and hijack other enemies and come out as, like, tendrils and stuff, I think that's a really good enemy design. Resident Evil 5, I don't think has an interesting enemy. Resident Evil 6, if it has one, I haven't met it. I've come whatever many hours into it as I have, and I don't remember any enemy being particularly memorable from that one. Resident Evil 7, I also don't think had great, you know, I don't think there was like a great memorable enemy. Maybe the Mold Men, but those guys are just zombies. Resident Evil 8, or did I say 8? I meant Resident Evil 7 if I said that. Resident Evil 8, I think, did really well with those mechanized monsters in Heisenberg's factory. The ones where you need to shoot out the lights to destroy them, and their lights are located on weird parts of their bodies. I like those enemies. I think they can sort of qualify. Also the werewolves, they were kind of fun. But this game, it has some chaser enemies that patrol the hallways and such, but what really distinguishes the enemy design in this one, and this is, I think, yeah, just exclusively to the Grace sections, because Leon's enemies feel very half-baked. It's stuff like this. It's stuff like the chef. It's stuff like that lady over there, the maid. It's stuff like this zombie who's banging on the wall, turn off the light, follow the rules. It's the Banshee siren lady. It's Chunk. It's all of these enemies that they all have a very specific role in the environment. It's the doctor who's operating on a corpse. All of these enemies have these very defined and very unique roles in their environments. And so you actually, you see one of them maybe walk a bit outside of the path or the sequence where he's supposed to be located in, and you go, oh, you're not where you're supposed to be. And I've never really had that in any Resident Evil game because the enemies have never been this distinct. And there's a lot of fun emergent gameplay with the different kinds of enemies you get. So the chunk enemy, hold on, maybe I can find him. That's the probably best new enemy in the game. He should be somewhere around here. But the chunk enemy is a big fat guy. Should be somewhere around here, shouldn't he? I don't know. Anyways, we'll talk about the. We'll talk maybe. I'll maybe point him out if we see him. But yeah, so his gimmick is that he's just a hunter enemy. He patrols through the hallways, tries to kill you. But he is so big that it's not like Mr. X, where if you can tank a punch, you can run around him. This guy just closes off the entire route. And that's really interesting. Having him patrol around the entire East Wing, great sequence, because you don't actually know if a route is open to you or not. And you aggro that guy and then run past some other enemies, he's going to come chase after you, and he'll just steamroll over and crush any enemy in your path. Around the halfway point or so of Grace's opening sequence here in the hospital or asylum or whatever this place is, you'll get the Crimson Heads to get active, and then you begin to think about whether or not maybe you should have been crafting those hemoglycon or whatever they're called injections instead of just crafting ammo to shoot the enemies, because man, those Crimson Heads, they're gonna insta-kill you if you don't have a knife or something to get rid of them with. Grace has the pistol. There's another pistol you can find, but it's just another pistol, and she also has the Requiem, the super gun that kills everything it shoots in one hit except the chef and the chunk enemy, I believe. Great. You know, you have a lot of choices there. It's great inventory management. The crafting, I think, is actually... It's probably the best in the franchise, because, as you can see here, you have these little blood splatters that you can find, and you have these laboratories where you can examine these blood vials that give you different recipes. And there's a lot of choices to be made in the crafting. You can even craft your own ink vials. If you find these empty tins and combine them with the blood. Blood being this universal currency for all things crafting, I really like. It doesn't work that way for Leon, he still uses gunpowder. But this, I think, is really, really great. I don't know if every enemy drops it, but enemies will also drop blood when they're killed. So, you start loading ammo into an enemy, you may feel the need to actually complete it in order to recoup some of the costs you've dumped into them. I haven't done any data mining on the game, so I'm not sure if this is the case, but I think the enemies might save the amount of damage you've done to them. So shoot half a magazine into a zombie in one room, then you encounter him an hour later, I think he'll still have that damage value set, provided you haven't reloaded or, because you died. And that's also another interesting way in which this kind of evolves the original horror presentation, is just in not just how many dynamic components there are in the world, but even that's a knife I stabbed into that guy's eye like 2 hours earlier into this playthrough or whatever, and now it's just available on the ground to be looted again, which is so great. It's evolving the formula not just by how many dynamic elements there are. There I'm blowing the guy's head up. Not just by how many dynamic elements there are, but how much of that you can affect, because the game also cares about the changes that you make. A lot of this comes to, especially with the enemy behaviors, this generates a lot of really fun emergent gameplay. Horror and emergent gameplay goes very hand in hand, as we all learned when we played Amnesia: The Bunker. There's a lot of scripting here. So in this sequence, for example, I don't know if it's now or if it's later, but I feel like both times I played the game, the chef eventually wound his way into this area. And this here little room with the pillar here and the shelves, what a great way to just funnel enemies in and do a little loop in order to break in. An enemy is ahead of you, then you turn back, do a loop here, and he'll be behind you in this room, and then you can go back. A lot of Resident Evil 2 remakes level design was really focused on that. A lot of rooms in the Raccoon City Police Department ended up being just, the dead ends are always kind of loops, so that if an enemy's chasing you, if Mr. X is chasing you, you can go into that room, wait for him to pick a direction to come at you from, and then you can choose the other direction and bolt out. This game, I feel, is not quite as generous with these sorts of looping dead ends, but it's still very generous compared to what these games used to play like. But so on presentation a little bit, the character swapping, I thought I was going to hate this when it initially began, and like I talked about, I initially thought, the Leon sequences are really short. I don't know if I like that. In hindsight, having played the full game, I think I would have, because it ends up being kind of like a 50-50 split of how much you play as each character. I think I probably would have preferred it to be, 90-10, or even less generous to Leon, and just have Leon be a vehicle. And we're getting into this part of considering what could have been, nitpicking, stuff like that. Just that is not critique. That is me saying, I'm just spitballing some ideas here. Don't take that as a failure of the game. Obviously, the game does not fail because it doesn't set out to meet ambitions I had for it after playing it. But yeah, I definitely feel the game is stronger when you're playing as Grace, and I think it really front loads quality. I think the early half of the game is a monumental AAA title. I think the second half of the game is just sort of a 7-8 out of 10, which is fine, and you can play that. But on replays, something tells me I'm going to be putting the game down after the basement sequence, or maybe after the sort of halfway point, with the sort of pronounced halfway point when Leon's sequence begins. I feel like I'm not going to be playing through to the end quite as often as I will this one, because I really don't think there is. Yeah, see, here he is. Here's the chef. He's in this area now. I think that's scripted. But yeah, I'm probably not going to be getting as much value out of those sequences because I don't think there's as much experimentation there. I don't think it's as tightly directed, and I don't think the dynamic elements make that as exciting as the early half Grace section. So yeah, the explosive amount of dynamic threats give Resident Evil 2 Remake a run for its money. The threats don't break out from their holdings like how Mr. X would chase you even in the lobby and zombies would eventually filter out there. But the enemies here all roam very far and are much more diverse in their behaviors than in Resident Evil 2 Remake. So it's better in one way, weaker in another. Not a critique, just observing. And yes, dynamic interactive elements keep the game fresh. So I complain a lot about games like Uncharted and The Last of Us, and the reason is that I don't think they embrace their games. There are substantially worse games to complain about than those, but those are sort of the standard bearers of their presentation format, so those are the games I always complain about. In those games, take Uncharted, I say, you can stand in any point in the map, and you can choose between the guns to use. And the enemies can also be located in different areas in the map. And theoretically, you break down all of the choices and all the different ways a scenario can play out. You're talking trillions and trillions and trillions of different variations of every single encounter. A lot of it is very minute, like you're standing 10 centimeters to the right of where you were standing in the last one, stuff like that. But theoretically, there are an endless almost amount of ways in which every single encounter there could play out. But so they do have dynamic elements, but I think the trick is how different feeling, how not how many objectively different ways it can play out, but how different all of the ways it plays out can feel. Because here, you could be coming into an encounter and you could have just saved and you'll have a lot of ammo on you, and it's just a power trip. You're just mowing down the enemies. Or that exact same encounter could be nerve-wracking because you didn't save. You couldn't save. You didn't have the material to save, and you don't have a lot of ammo. And there is an entire range of emotions you could be going through in between these extremes. You know, maybe you're not even in that sort of tense state or the mow everything down power trip stage. Maybe you're just entering that encounter really trying to configure your crafting. So you're trying to maximize how much blood you have, and you're just looking around for more scrap. And this encounter that was set up and that actually had emotional impact in these other ways you were playing, there it's just like another thing that you do in the game, no different from any of the other hallway routes you take. And yeah, it's not just how many objectively different ways can it play out, it's how different all of them can feel. That I think really add value to having all of this dynamism in the game. So yeah, scrolling down, enemy variety, we've talked quite a bit about that. Big fan of the uniqueness of the enemies. Each one has a personality and a job. And yes, when you push... So this is something I love about Grace. I've talked recently about... there's no term for this, really, but I like to call it impact frames, or impact actions. The best example I remember in any game that has this is Resident Evil 4, where, you know, you walk up to a door, you press square, and Leon will open the door. But if, while he's opening the door, you press square again, instead of opening it just gently with his hand, he'll kick it open violently. Another example of this is in Arkham City. For those of you who played that great game, best Arkham game. If you jump off a ledge, Batman will jump off the ledge, and you know press X, open up the glide cape, and he'll glide. But if you double tap jump off the ledge, he'll do a flip off the ledge. And mechanically, maybe he has a bit more hang time, you know, maybe he jumps a bit higher, you know, maybe there's some tiny amount of mechanical depth you can squeeze from having that double jump there, that little flip. But the value is in how kinetic it feels. The value in Leon kicking open the door instead of gently opening it, it's not necessarily in it's saving an extra second or so. You know, maybe it does that, but that's not the value. The value is how much more kinetic and, you know, hype and energetic it feels in your hands. And this, I don't know if anybody, maybe I should make a video on this because I haven't seen anybody really talk about this phenomenon. But I always love it when I see it. Sort of tangentially related to that, because I was talking about the combat and pushing enemies here, is in this game, when you're playing as Leon, if an enemy knocks you on your back, Leon will be prone for a little bit, and then he'll stand up again, and you know he has recovery animation. And when I was playing, I had a distinct feeling that I should have a choice once I've been knocked prone, which is either I can stay stationary, lying on the ground, aim at enemies and shoot them and continue fighting, or I can prompt for Leon to stand up. Now, if I stay stationary, maybe an enemy attack will just insta-kill me because I'm not in a good position to defend myself. And then you change this, you know, getting knocked on your ass, that's sort of a failure state in combat here. You can change that into a choice. You add interactivity even to this end of interactivity. And that sort of relates to... it's not quite the same thing as what I talked about with impact actions, as I called them, but it's sort of it relates to that. It's you're keeping the player in the flow of things, even as he's just watching these animations play out. Because again, it doesn't mechanically matter much whether you open a door or you kick it open, but it feels really good. It doesn't mechanically matter much whether you jump off a ledge or you do a flip off a ledge, but it feels very different. And yeah, so mechanically it would of course matter if you had that setup that I explained, where you can keep shooting and firing and aiming the gun when you're lying on the ground, or you can choose to stand up. Mechanically, that would make a big difference. And I think it would be... There he is, there's the chunk enemy. I think that would be a great addition to the game. I think it would, because I find that grabs... they tend to just end the interaction without creating a lot of interesting choices. Now, he just grabbed me there, and I had the prompt to press R2 to use a knife to stab him, But I didn't do that because I knew he would be locking off this hallway and I would be walking back into this room with a crimson head, and he may grab me, and if he were to grab me, I would still need that knife. Chunk is not an insta-kill, but this guy is. So that's an interesting choice. You know, this is a scenario where actually me not having an added choice to, well, actually this is an example of me having that choice, but there are certainly scenarios where just ending the interaction with the failure state of the player being grabbed or stunned or whatever, that's enough. But I always appreciate it when even at the end stage a second choice is added. And what I love about the combat here as Grace is this. It's the push. It stuns enemies, it throws them on their ass for a little bit. If there are many enemies and you push one of them, you can push them into other enemies, it knocks them down too. Gives you time to run, but it also gives you time to just blow into their heads right there. Which is great. And there, I wasn't able to activate the knife. I don't know if I already did that and I lost it, or maybe I just miscalculated being able to use the knife or whatever. But it doesn't really matter. But my point is that as Grace, I feel every single choice and every action feels so meticulous and so fully thought out. It is, this game, the Grace section here, it is to the Ethan Resident Evil 7 gameplay what Leon Kennedy in Resident Evil 4 combat was to Jill Valentine in Resident Evil 3 combat. It feels like they took the basic blueprint and they just blew open the conceptual space and perfected it. I can't imagine taking this and really adding anything to it without it also just affecting other elements of the game in detrimental ways. It's so fully thought out and incredible, and I just love that. So yes, enemy variety, talked about that. Boss design, I guess we'll save that for spoilers. The exploration here is pretty good. One thing that the Resident Evil games have never struggled with, except in maybe Resident Evil 3 Remake, is engaging and endearing environments with choices to make, with interesting lore. These games have long since perfected the formula of making an encounter, making an area feel interesting with just level design alone. A lot of the story is told with you stumbling into notes and such that give sort of context clues, and then you look at things like this and you think, I wonder if this guy is at all related to that patient who had that eating disorder, like Terrare, and he was eating like blood bags in other patients. And yeah, that feels great, There's... for one thing they do for Grace that I did not expect to come back is the same thing they did for Ethan, where she has upgrades. You can upgrade your health, you can upgrade gun damage. It's a choice. It's another interesting choice. It adds some value to the crafting material and it gives you a reason to find those coins everywhere. It's not a bad thing, but it's one of these things where, kind of like the parry, it feels a bit... It feels like it's an addition made for the sake of having a choice there, rather than there being a meaningful, rather than it meaningfully adding to the gameplay. So yeah, for all of this stuff we do as Grace, there's a lot of variety. I see so much replay value in just talking about this, just looking at this. I want to get back into the heat of the thing. The Stalker enemies are great, both the Little Sister and Chunk and the Chef. The Chef is actually a really interesting sort of mix, because he is tougher than the average zombies, but he's not nearly the same sort of impediment that the Little Sister is, or that Chunk over here was. He's just like a big guy with a butcher's knife, and he'll just kill you if he can. But yeah, so that's really great. I initially thought I was really going to hate that the enemies all have professions and personalities, because I thought, oh, this is going to get really annoying really quick. But no, actually, I found it really, really interesting. And I look back and I think it might actually be hard going back to something like Resident Evil 2 Remake, knowing just how much more expressive things would get in so few years. And that's something I really need to just hammer home on this, is that this is not just, oh, it's Resident Evil 2 again, but it takes place in a different area. Oh no, no. Every single component of that game that I loved so much has been built on top of and just expanded in really interesting ways. So yeah, I feel like it may be hard to elaborate more on the Leon sections without going fully into spoilers. So, I'm looking at my notes here. On 4 separate occasions, I have the note, everybody has great hair. The hair is really beautiful. And it's true, one of the best hairs in the game. Audio design's good. I've really nothing to talk about that. UI, it's interesting how Grace, she has the classic fine, caution, danger, health system from classic Resident Evil games. Leon has his Resident Evil 4 health, where it's like a wheel that fills up. That's just kind of fun. Voice acting is really good. I didn't like Grace in the beginning, but she won me over. She won me over by the end. I think the characters are all interesting, but I feel like that's maybe a talk for spoilers. Technical stuff, I think on one occasion I noticed some pop-ins during the exterior at the very, very beginning. I did not notice any significant frame drops. There may have been some in the recording, but that's purely on through Elgato. That if that happened during gameplay, I wasn't aware of it as I was recording it. And probably I've never seen a game as devoted to accessibility options as this one does. I mean, you can turn on the auto aim, you can swap from first person to third person, you have camera speeds while aiming. Like it's a lot. It's actually, you're kind of spoiled for choice. There's so many choices to make there, and it feels like it kind of feels like maybe there should have been an accessibility option for dummies, where, look, we know here are the 4 things that you care about, so here are they all in one screen, but if you want to get really, really into the nitty-gritty of the whole thing, you can do that, and here's another screen that's just that. Score. So the music, actually, we can talk about the music before we talk spoilers. Resident Evil has 2 great tracks. There's the save room theme, and there's the farting clown song that they added to the basement in the original game's director's cut. Ha ha ha, very funny joke. Very funny joke, very funny joke. No, Resident Evil has one great theme. It's the save theme. And I actually found that, this is not a spoiler, it was in the trailer, when I entered the police station and the police station theme played, that actually got me. It was, oh yeah, I remember that theme. That played, it was really good. But, and this is not a criticism of the game in any way, it's just something that I've been thinking about. I feel this series is really lacking for iconic music. You know, you think about what's Solid Snake's theme. You know, it immediately pops into your head. What does Nathan Drake? What does his theme sound like? You know, Ratchet and Clank. What does that sound? But then you think of like Leon Kennedy. What's his song? And I think the best you can do is like that mariachi band at the beginning of Resident Evil 4 remake, maybe. You know, Chris Redfield. What is his song? Jill Valentine. What's her song? And I feel like. It's you know, this game 30th anniversary, it's sort of a love letter to the franchise. It feels like maybe, you know, I don't know, I feel like we should have had iconic themes for all of these characters at this point, but I guess we just didn't. So just going over the notes again before we hit spoilers.
Phase 2's about to begin.
Yeah, I think we're done. I think so. We're about 40 minutes into this review thingy, and I think I've talked as much about the material. I love this line here. Would you like to see what's under the hood? And it's the camera cuts over, like, to this thing, and it just starts bleeding out of the pores, and you know. Ooh, what's going on here? What's going on with its head? Ooh, it's such a creepy scene. It's really good. But yeah, I feel like we've talked as much as we can about the game without going into spoilers. So, if you're watching this and you haven't played the game,
Would you like to see?
you know, for whatever my opinion's worth, hopefully this isn't the first video of mine that you're watching. Go Tell Aunt Rhodey has always been what I think of as a Resident Evil. That's actually a really good one. I'll give you that one. Bradley Adams. But yeah, for whatever my opinion's worth, this has the absolute highest praise I can possibly give a game. Like every great game, I have issues with it, specifically related to that second half. But it's still a 10 out of 10. It does so many things interesting. I would wholeheartedly encourage everybody watching to just buy this game, play it for yourself. Because we don't get a lot of games like this anymore. And we should be very appreciative and very vocal about when we do. And that's also why I say 10 out of 10, even though I think it slides pretty hard on the back end, because you know, you put a Ghost of Tsushima in front of me, or you put an Assassin's Creed Bobbity Boop in front of me, and that's a 6. That's a 6 out of 10. It's just it's not doing anything interesting for me. This, in spite of maybe having a weaker second act than the second half than the first half, that first half is so good, and we just really need to cherish that, and really hopeful that we get more of this sort of stuff. But that's spoiler-free talk.
What is this?
Let's talk spoilers. If you're listening live, if you're listening to the VOD later on, this is the spoiler portion. From this moment on, there will be spoilers. You do not get to complain about spoilers from moving from this point on. There will be spoilers on screen. There will be spoilers in chat. There will be spoilers that we talk about. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. Everybody on the same page here. I thought for a second, or for a couple of minutes actually, I actually thought they were going to pull the trigger and kill Leon off. I knew in my heart they wouldn't do that. You know, you're not killing off your most popular character. But then I was like, well, maybe. Because they already did this plot. You know, Leon is infected, and he and this petite little blonde girl have to work together to overcome the enemies and find a cure. And, you know, that's the story of Resident Evil 4. And they just did it again, and I thought, you can't do that unless you're gonna kill him, right? And they killed Alyssa Ashcroft, so, you know, well, you know, they might be willing to kill off more characters. And, you know, he does die in one of the endings, the non-canon ending, I imagine. It's a really funny death too, because the Wesker jobber, he just blam shoots him in the head, and Leon's like, oh, I could save you at least. It's funny, but yeah, there was a moment where I thought, are they actually gonna kill him? I don't know. I don't particularly care. I wouldn't care if they did or not. I'm not that invested in these characters, but I do think story-wise, this game has a lot of issues, but I can't really point to any issue in the story here without saying, well, that is true of every Resident Evil game. So there's a lot of contrivances here. There's a lot of convenience. So just contrivances. Leon, you know, he's shooting the zombies at the beginning, he's chasing that dastardly Victor Gideon. And then he gets to the place, and everybody's a zombie. And Leon, he just decides to follow the lady. He doesn't have follow-up questions. Also, Leon doesn't just immediately shoot the guy that is clearly Victor Gideon, just blow his leg off or whatever. Just tiny stuff like that you say, hey, you ignore that stuff for the sake of the story being able to play out. And that's not necessarily a great excuse to hand wave away issues you have with story. But if we're talking about contrivances, the entirety of Resident Evil 8 happens because Chris Redfield, for no reason whatsoever, decides he's not going to elaborate at all with Ethan in the beginning. You know, he shoots Evelyn pretending to be Mia. Why not say, hey, Ethan, this isn't what it looks like. Let me explain to you. It's just for no reason whatsoever. And they like try to justify it later as, oh, I didn't want to get him involved. You're like, he thinks you just killed his wife. He's involved. You involved him already. And giving him less information, that makes him more involved. It's just, you know, contrivances are part and parcel of the way these stories in these games come together. I find that Resident Evil is kind of like the Terminator. You don't overthink it, because once you start to overthink it, both in the actual nuts and bolts mechanics of the reality of the world, so you have all of these monsters and you have these people evolving and mutating into these horrible monstrosities. Where's the biomass coming from? Once you start asking questions like that, the entire thing just begins to fall apart. And for the sort of contrivances that we have, yes, this game has them. If you were to analyze this game as, you know, you do like a literary analysis of the way the story comes together, you could point to a lot of things and say, that ain't great. You know, this is inferior to what my standards have set me up to expect. But at the same time, I don't think this is that sort of franchise. I think Resident Evil is a franchise where the story, you know, it matters. It gives context to the happenings and such, but it's more of a vibe, if that makes sense. You know, you're not doing it for the sake of saving the world. You're doing it because it's a good, you know, you're having a good time with your friends. So yeah, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of, the Resident Evil franchise is notorious for this. A lot of, an enemy will grab a character that they're trying to kill, and then they throw them up against a wall when they already had them in their hands and could have just squeezed their head off. It's a lot of stuff like that, but all of that is forgiven. That's not why I play these games. If you are a hardcore, I can only play a game if I can take the storytelling seriously, then this probably ain't a game for you. Nor is this really a franchise for you either. But like I said, that's not why I play these games, so not really something I have a massive problem with. So the story of the game is that Grace Ashcroft, she's Hope. She's the like that terrible script for God of War 3. It's Hope, Kratos. It's all Hope. That's what all of this is. It's just weak writing. But here, they do a bit to justify it. There's a lot of, I don't know, retcons are the right word. I think there's a lot of sort of readjustments to the fine points of the plot of the franchise in order to make this all make sense. So, Oswald Spencer, you know, after Umbrella was shut down or taken away from him, he was bankrupt. He becomes a secluded man, lives alone in his summer home, cabin, mansion, whatever. And he has a change of heart because of all of the terrible things that have happened, and he creates something called Elpis, which is basically a cure-all for all biological diseases. And Grace is the key to that. I forget how, or I wasn't paying attention. Basically, they do a lot of experiments with kids, and she's the original, but I don't know if that necessarily makes sense, because I think that sequence played out in 1990, and those girls would have been like 5-6 years old. And that would make Grace 40, entering her 50s in this game, and that just can't be right. So maybe she's also a clone, but she's a perfect clone. Not quite sure how that works. There probably is an actual, you know, you look at the raw mechanics of it all and it makes sense, but yeah. Once again, I don't overthink those sorts of things, because Leon Kennedy, you know, I think it's 49 or something in this game. He's still doing roundhouse kicks. The age of these characters, they're sort of ageless, but yeah. So I do like that. I've never really cared about Oswald Spencer as a character, but now I think he might be my favorite Resident Evil character. Just because of that sequence at the end where he's talking about how, you know, I really screwed the pooch on this one, but I'm going to make it right. And he creates this super weapon, they think, but actually it's just a cure. It's a cure. I imagine the way, if there's any thought into the mechanics of how it actually works, I would imagine that Elpis just has the baseline untainted DNA of humankind itself in it, and it's kind of like so if you know about a lot of people became experts on vaccines because I don't know if you know this, Jeff. We had a pandemic recently. But I did my thesis on mRNA vaccine technology back in 2018, I think, when I did the Metal Gear Solid commentary. But from memory, the way it was devised originally was by looking at the immune system of houseflies, because their DNA is not complicated enough to have an actual immune system, like little cells that attack infections and such. And so what they have instead is they have their DNA, and then they have a sort of compressed, I guess, WinRAR version, unRAR'd version, or RAR'd actually, compressed version of their DNA. And they have a scanner that is able to check their DNA and then is able to check the way it should be. And when they notice irregularities, they just cut that irregularity, that chunk out, and replace it with what should be there. And that's how mRNA technology, from memory, was originally developed. The idea being that instead of waiting for random mutation, you can devise a way in which to just remove specific little blocks out of the genome. Now, the tail end danger to that, I mean, the human genome, incredibly complicated, and you often see those articles on science magazines and such where people go, we should eradicate the mosquito. Scientists have proven that the mosquito is useless. You can just kill it and it won't affect the ecosystem at all. And you rub two brain cells together and you go, that sounds like something an insane person would say, or somebody who is a moron would say, because what do you mean it doesn't affect the ecosystem? Of course it does. Just because you don't know how it affects the ecosystem doesn't mean it doesn't affect it at all. And that was, at least when I was reading about mRNA technology during the days of Metal Gear Solid commentary, that had been the sort of big hang-up with trial experimentations with it, is that you're interfacing with a very complicated system, and the only way you're really going to know the effect of this is to do it. And so I imagine Elpis works kind of like that, where, like back to the game. Elpis, I imagine, if it has a mechanical way of working, is like that, where it has like something approaching, human broadly. Like a human being can be the range from this to this, and this and this and this and this and this. You inject it with somebody who's infected by a viral weapon, and it's a cure-all. It's basically an end to viral, what did they say, bioterrorism or whatever. That is a really interesting gimmick. That's a really interesting sort of MacGuffin for this franchise. It's also really interesting because what do you do next? What do you do with a franchise about bioorganic monstrosities in a world that has a cure-all for all of that? Do you do prequels? Do you retcon it and go, no, it's a disease that's so deadly, even Elpis can't cure it? Many different ways I imagine they could take it. But, so yeah, Leon has the T-virus, Sherry has the T-virus, probably Jill also has the T-virus, but she's not in this game. I actually I thought about it. Because this was already the story of Leon in the fourth game, it might have made sense if Jill had been the protagonist instead. Obviously, that's not like a criticism of the game that they went with Leon. He's a much more popular character, you get it. But Jill, you think, because that's also a characterization issue. I'm like for diversions from the thing I was talking about, away from the thing I was talking about here. But yeah, so Leon's characterization is really all over the map, because and fair enough, but I also feel like he these characters are completely reinvented for any game they're in, and I feel like there is never, like maybe Ethan, but I feel like there's never really been a strong characterization of the character from one game directly into the other one. But Leon is really weird. There's a sequence because he has like post-traumatic stress disorder, and he's like, Raccoon City, the sign of my great failure. And, he goes there and he's like, ooh, I'm going to make things right. I'm going to make things right this time. This time, I won't just... And, it's... He's talking to Sherry, and Sherry doesn't comment at all that, hey, Leon, it wasn't a total failure. You saved my life. You did do something right. Like, that moment doesn't come up. Sherry doesn't really reflect at all on Raccoon City. She was a kid, I get it. But so that's why maybe it would have made a bit more sense if it had been Jill. Because we don't know, like Jill, she's kind of punished, Leon has had this arc already, and maybe it would have made more sense if it had been Jill. Because she goes back to Raccoon City, and yeah, that is a sign of her great failure, because her game there is just about escaping. Whereas Leon, first day on the job, and, he rescues people, and, Leon is also, we've been with Leon since then enough times, whereas with Jill, you look at that and you think, maybe having her revisit this area might go some ways towards giving her closure to what happened here. And yeah, having her have this disease, it maybe would not have felt quite as repetitive since it's a different character this time around. But yeah, Not like a great criticism of the game or anything. And also, I don't like what they did with Claire in the remake, and they are going off of remake continuity here. I don't like her look. It's a handsome lady who they got to model for her, but, gosh, Jill Valentine just has a defined look from the Resident Evil remake, and Resident Evil 5, carries that look pretty unchanged. She's blonde, but that's it. So, and like, the new one, she just doesn't look anything like Jill. They had that same problem sort of in Leon in Resident Evil 2 remake, even though in the PlayStation 1 original, he kind of just looks like, Woody from Toy Story, just like plastic face, and then they gave him a defined look in Resident Evil 4, and, they sort of evolved that from there. But even in Resident Evil 4 remake, they tweaked it. There's this Romanian guy who face models for Leon. They took his face and they tweaked it. I don't know exactly what they did, whether they just gave him, they just sunk his eyes a bit in, or gave him like these sorts of hoods over his eyes, or maybe just, they did something. They did something to the face model between Resident Evil 2 and 4 remake, 2 remake and 4 remake. They did something to try to sort of move Leon back to what he kind of is supposed to look like. And, I would want them to do that to Jill again when they decide to reuse her. But I don't like her personality. But maybe that's something that they could have addressed here. You evolve the character by having her be present here.
These girls.
But yeah, so new Jill, not a big fan of. I like old Jill better. So, routing that back to what we were talking about with Elpis, Leon comes in here, he's sick, and they're looking for Victor Gideon. He's this doctor guy, he's actually a nemesis from Umbrella from back in the day. I forget why he's looking for him. I don't think he's looking for a cure per se. I think he's just going there because an FBI agent went missing, and it had to do with bioorganic weaponry or whatever. Then Leon comes here and he rescues Grace, and Grace is trying to rescue this little girl Emily, and Emily is a clone of Grace, or Grace is a clone of the same girl that Emily's a clone of. All of these experimentations to try to get Elpis, but then Elpis is a cure, so... And like that's kind of the revelation with... Yes, because I was talking about Oswald Spencer. Now I remember, because the revelation is that, oh no, she's just normal. That's what makes her special. Like, she's just normal, she's my hope for the future, and... that's kind of neat. It's a weird place to wrap the series up for now. Obviously more games are coming, more remakes are coming, and sequels will come. But it's an interesting development. it's not like the deepest story in the world, but this isn't Silent Hill. You don't play Resident Evil for the deep stories. You play it because these are fun characters and this is some good old-fashioned gameplay. They don't, like I said, they don't make them like this anymore. Gonna route back into my notes now. Oh, god damn it! I forgot. The most important spoiler section. Spoiler. The most important thing I wanted to bring up. Sorry about clapping. The most important thing I wanted to bring up is that the spiders are back. Leon fights a giant spider when he goes to Raccoon City, and I loved that. It happened, and I was like, ooh, yes, what a great sequence. Because, like I said at the beginning, it's not a zombie franchise. It's like this biohazard, bioorganic mutations. That's the threat here, and the zombies harken back to that. I love this enemy. Also, does anybody else feel like I'm owed residuals for you guys who played Snail, the alpha of Snails Have Skeletons? You played Snail. You remember the Academy sequence. I had an enemy that I'm thinking they ripped off wholesale in creating the little sister hunter enemy. not really, but there were moments I thought like, this is sus. Capcom, pay me. But obviously, that enemy was my ripoff of Mr. X deliberately. So, and obviously nobody at Capcom knows who I am, so it's not a ripoff. I'm being funny here, but yeah, it's what it is. Motorcycle driving sequence, that was pretty fun. Actually, on that, I guess we could. It's probably this. Where is it? Motorcycle. There we go. So yeah, here's Leon Kennedy in Raccoon City, and it's very uneventful, I always figure the way to do an open world Resident Evil is you just, you don't do open world as in wide open spaces. You do open world and you don't even need to do it like they did in 3, where you just have this sort of these closed off alleyways that loop around into different dead ends. You could just design it kind of like the Spencer Mansion, where, or the RPD, or what's it called, Ravenhill here. It's just, hold on, let's, I want to talk about the motorcycle, but let's, go into the open world a little bit, where it's just stuff like this, like a subway system, and, that's one way to route into an area. And then you just have 2 or 3 routes in and out of every major area. And rather than being an open space, it's a puzzle box, but you just frame it within a city. And I don't feel like, I love Raccoon City in Resident Evil 3. That's probably the best of the original Resident Evil games. But yeah, I don't love what they did with it here. And on one hand, I kind of get it because it's more of a combat sequence for Leon, but I still think there's something to unlocking the world, and I can imagine if Leon's enemies, he has a lot of lickers and such, and it's kind of a problem because Leon is so powerful that you kind of can't do those same sorts of horror sequences. But I think there is some way of striking the balance of, here you have this open world that is actually just a puzzle box that you unlock in the exact same way you do the Spencer Mansion, and instead, it's just, this is what half of the game, the second half of the game is. And it's fine, the combat is polished, it looks really good if that matters to you, plays nice, you're having fun, you don't want to blow your brains out or anything, but you play this and you are thinking back to Grace and being like, man, I wish I was doing that instead, huh? But every Resident Evil game has a weaker second act, so we can't be too complainy. Well, Resident Evil 3 actually, the clock tower, that was pretty great. But Resident Evil games, no strangers to sagging in the later half, so we take it. We still take it. So yeah, going now to the motorcycle. Where is it? There we go. This is the least interactive part of the game, outside of maybe the Orphanage revisit, but... So usually, I'd be the first guy to complain about something like this, because this is how the cinematic games get across scenarios that are this far outside of the range of their core mechanics to express. This is any game, like an Uncharted, where you're being dragged behind a convoy of cars and, you have to jump in between them, and it's really scripted, and there's very little actual interactivity. This is that, Leon's driving by himself here. I can move him a little bit, but there's no danger of me crashing or anything like that. I'm mainly just shooting. I don't mind sequences like this in games that are as explosively interactive as this game is. Because when this is a 3-minute sequence juxtaposed to, however many hours of really interesting routing and choices and resource management and such, this is actually a really good way to break up the game. When this is just your average sequence in, again, I talk about the Uncharted and such, I'm sorry, it's always those games. When this is just a sequence there in games that are already so monotonous and so uninteractive, this stuff really grates on them. Because this isn't a change of pace, it's not a change of tempo. This is just the same uninteractive, monotonous gameplay as the rest of your games. Whereas here, this is very, very different. It's a short sequence. It's not like difficult or anything. I bring this up because I saw a lot of people complain about it. It's fine. I'm fine with it. And I feel like a lot of the hate, because there are people who are like detractors of this game immediately, which, I get it. I don't think this game is without flaw, but I feel like the two kinds of detractors, and there are many kinds of detractors, but the two kinds of detractors that I see a lot of and that I have very little time for are, this one has butchered the franchise, which is brother, this franchise, like, we have seen this franchise butchered. This ain't it. Just no. Neither in gameplay, presentation, story, like, there is no part of this that is the low point of the franchise. Oh, but everybody got a happy ending at the end. Leon survived, and Grace survived, and the stakes were non-existent, and even Emily, she comes back, and it's just... Yeah, man, like, that's also the ending to Resident Evil 4. Do you remember that? And also Resident Evil 3, and also Resident Evil 2. Like, that's... Resident Evil has that sort of upbeat and super earnest sincerity at the end of their games. That's what this franchise is. This is a ridiculous complaint. I feel it's a ridiculous complaint. If it matters to you that this one should have been different, then fine, but don't say it butchered the franchise on the grounds of it did the same thing the rest of the franchise always does. The other sort of complaint about this that I've been seeing is that the second act dips it, because I think people are pretty universally in agreement that the first half is the best AAA experience we've gotten in years. But a lot of the complaints are that, well, the second half dips, and because of that, it's a failure of a game. And I'm just like, no, come on. That first half is good enough to be the best game, the best AAA released in years. That second act, I don't know, man, like, The Last of Us wins Game of the Year awards. Red Dead Redemption wins Game of the Year awards. God of War will win Game of the Year awards. This second act of this game is in no way inferior to any of those games in any domain wherein they share. In combat, it is easily on par with all of them. Visual design, level design, just there is no way in which the second half of this game is lesser to any of those games. So, like, this is only a detractor for, like, this could only be seen as negative because you have that highly superior Grace sequence in the beginning to compare it to. And I'm with you in having wanted maybe more of that, and having had Leon sequences maybe just be 5-minute sequences, the sniping sequence, or him breaking into Ravenhill or whatever it's called, and maybe just have him do, like, the drive to Raccoon City, or maybe a motorcycle. Like, have the Grace sequence be these puzzle box sequences that play for 2-3 hours, and then Leon just has 5 to 10 minutes of gameplay in between that, and then maybe the final level is just a Leon level where you just mow everything down or whatever. Like, I think there are ways in which this game could have been structured more interestingly. I don't think what we have here is necessarily the best version of this game it could have been, but how can you look at this and go, well, I think they've butchered it. I think this is, you know, they really shot the dog on this one, huh? They really wrecked the whole thing, didn't they? No, come on.
Looks like it.
But yeah,
I'll take a look around.
so yeah, here the Raccoon City Police Department theme is about to play. You know, this is something I always love in a video game. This is just the opening to Resident Evil 2 Remake. There's that tanker that separated Leon and Claire. I always love this in any video game. I loved it in Dark Souls 3, where we revisited the revisit Anne Orlando. I loved it in Silent Hill 3 when we revisit Alessa's room at the end in the church. I loved it in, you know, I even loved it in Ratchet and Clank 3 when we revisit Velden. In any game where I'm revisiting an area in an older game. Kingsfield 3, you know, you go back to the catacombs, you go back to the Royal Cemetery from Kingsfield 1. Not the whole thing, but a large part of it. In any part where you revisit an area from a previous games, ooh, it hits really well. I always love that stuff. So yeah, routing. Oh, so the first route here in the police department is. Hold on, I need to swap footage because. Okay, so this is the smallest thing in the world, but I actually do like it. Okay, he's gonna start moving now. They flip the routing. So now you enter from this area and make your way to the entrance to the West Wing. Whereas in Resident Evil 2 Remake, first you go to the East Wing little portion, and then Marvin, you know, you meet up with Marvin. Then you go through the West Wing and you do the route normal style. Now it's inverted. I think that's fun, you know. It's not anything to write home about. It's not like this greatest kick-a-brain move or whatever, but I think it's fun. I was surprised that we didn't see Marvin again. In as many times as I've seen that zombie and had to put him down in all of these games across the years, it kind of surprised me that he doesn't make an appearance here. The hardest working zombie in the business didn't make an appearance, but you know, the vending machine zombie, he reappeared, and fun Easter eggs here. Fun to explore this place again. The tofu cameo was pretty random, and oh, where is it? Okay, here. Out of all of the great legacy areas in Raccoon City, from Resident Evil 2 and 3, you have the gas station, for example. You know, and we have a gas station in this one. I don't think it's the same one, but maybe it is. I don't know. But out of all of the great areas, you know, the zoo, you have the hospital, you have the clock tower, the freaking clock tower. Out of all of the great legacy areas in Raccoon City, across all of these games, I'm a bit baffled that they thought to bring me back to the orphanage. This shithole is probably the area I wanted to revisit the least. And this is that sequence that all of these games have. So, Resident Evil 2 Remake, you have the Sherry sequence, you have the Ada sequences, you know, much less interactive. The Resident Evil 4 has the Ashley sequences. Resident Evil 3 just, you know, that doesn't have a bad sequence per se. It's just not a really great game. Resident Evil 7 has those sequences where you play as the video camera guy. But yeah, like, all of these games just seemingly have to have that sequence that takes 15-20 minutes to complete and has no interactivity in it whatsoever. And I hate it. Oh, how I hate it so much. So yeah, let's fast forward through that, because who wants to watch this? Some lore. Oh, it's me. It's me. I'm Xeno. I'm evil. Oh yeah, here we go. Here's his Albert Wesker moves, and that's also. And I know I keep harping on about the alternative version of this game where Jill is the protagonist. Leon Kennedy is my guy. He's my favorite. He's my favorite of the protagonists in these games. I'm so happy it was a Leon game. I was so hyped when I saw Leon in the trailers and such. I don't keep harping on about Jill Valentine as the alternate protagonist here, because I'm dissatisfied with what I got. I also don't think a lot of people on the Twitters are making this a gender thing. And I've seen a lot of comments, a lot of posts be like, Resident Evil is a franchise that's afraid to let its women headline their games. I think this is pathetic. I think this is a pathetic argument made by people who are probably addicted to being mad. Resident Evil has some of the best written and just most beloved women, is that the term? In video games. Claire, she headlined Resident Evil 2 remake along with Leon. Jill Valentine, she headlined Resident Evil 3 remake by herself, aside from a short Carlos sequence. Ashley Graham, she was in Resident Evil 4, not like as big as Leon, but she was still there. This game, half of it, the superior half, the half everyone loves, is headlined by a woman. I'm not saying that, I'm not making it like a politically correct thing or whatever. Just to say that, if Jill is the protagonist, this encounter becomes interesting. Because Leon has no history with Wesker, but Jill might. And then this encounter here might actually be interesting in and of itself. But because Leon and Wesker don't have any dynamic, they have to bring this guy back. And I actually kind of love it. It's like, again, contrivance. It's contrivance because, hey, you know this guy, don't you? You remember running from him in this place before, don't you? Well, now you get to do it again. And it's like, okay, okay, hey, that's pretty great, huh? And it is. It's incredibly scripted. There's not a lot of expressiveness to this sequence here. Leon collapses the roof on him. He breaks through the wall. Leon jumps around. He throws the helicopter at the player and tries to rip through the wall here. And it's a really cool sequence. Also like that they did something with that helicopter because, hey, that's pretty cool. Go to Chief's office, run around a little bit, and then, like this sequence here. This is another one of these contrivances. Leon is running away from him. He's just on the tip of his heels. Then he walks back into the lobby, and he turns around, and he's just like, I can't see him, therefore I don't need to think about him anymore. It's like, Leon. But again, we don't make those sorts of complaints. It's just funny to point it out a little bit,
I'm good.
So yeah, Mr. X is back. That's fun. There's a boss fight with Mr. X. It's kind of parry heavy. I don't think this was a great fight, but just that power trip of, yeah, I'm Leon 30 years later, 30-something years later, and now this is just what I can do to you. It's fun, but it also sort of highlights how I'm more interested in the new batch of Resident Evil characters because this is what Leon's games are gonna be. You can't make Leon the scared guy doing resource management again. I mean, I guess you can. You could just ignore the characterization. They've done it before. But you really can't. Like, this is what the Resident Evil game with Chris and Jill and Leon is. So Grace, I think, more interesting. Ethan, more interesting until they made him a super weapon too. But yeah, it's still fun. You get to fight this guy. The boss fights in this game are, I think they're just kind of hurt by the fact that it is Leon's combat, and I don't think it is great. The chunk fight in the not ceiling. Lord, the word escapes me. The very word for that, the top room of a house. It's not the ceiling. The ceiling is the thing on top of the house. The anti-basement, let's call it. Yeah, that fight is kind of weak. It's not even weak. You're just running around, and it's hectic, it's fun, it's engaging and all that, but not very expressive. And it's also weakened by the fact that if you kill Chunk as Grace before that sequence plays out, you'll still have to kill him as Leon. And if you kill the chef as Grace, he'll still come to try to kill her when Leon is defending her with the sniper rifle. And, Resident Evil 2, original style, the choices you made as one character in one route, in one run, would affect the other one. So you pick up this loot, you pick up a pouch or you pick up a machine gun, it's not going to be there for the other party to pick up. Here, that's true of item drops and item loots, but not so much, and like the zombies, you kill all the zombies as Leon, it's going to make it much easier for Grace. And I appreciated that stuff, but it's strange to me that killing Chunk just does nothing for that Leon sequence. Killing Chef, he still appears. It's kind of like how in the cutscenes Leon will pull out a gun and shoot even though that gun is empty in gameplay. It's just one of these things where they don't fully integrate the story and the game as you played it. And, it's strange because they could have. It would not have been much harder to create a sequence in the anti-basement, our agreed upon term. Nobody bully me. I've been talking for a while now. my mind a bit frayed. It would not have been that much harder to script that sequence to have Leon just not encounter anybody, or just encounter like a couple of Crimson Heads or whatever instead, and just not have Chief show up, not have the chef show up to go for Grace when Leon is defending her with a sniper. And again, I don't want to just make this stream what if it was 90% Grace, 10% Leon, and they're always sort of in the same area, and there's a fun interplay of the choices you make with each character in each section. Like, you can make choices as Grace that make it easier for her to route around, but might actually screw Leon in some ways. But then it's also like, it's really fun to just play as Leon and go, okay, I've been running away from... Because that's also the way these games sort of progress. You're always opening them up, you unlock more and more stuff. The way he throws these cars is ridiculous. You always open up more areas, unlock more stuff, get more ammo, get more guns, become better at killing the enemies, kill more of the enemies, and by the end, you've sort of unlocked everything, and the routing becomes no problem for you. And I think the swap to Leon, once you reach that stage as Grace, that's so great because the Resident Evil games always sort of become action games at the end, but I don't think they ever quite land. But here, they could have, because now you just have Leon go in there and mop the floor with everything that's left. And you sort of get that, you get that thrill, that sort of power fantasy of, yes, okay, and I'm gonna go both floors, both wings, just empty everything of threats, so that when I come back as Grace, it's gonna be easy. I'm sorry that I keep going back to the what could have been, but if that was the entire game, and instead of Leon sequence, a Leon half and a Grace half, it had just been Grace goes through 3 different sort of puzzle box environments. He's killing me a lot, I realize. Instead of that, you just have... Oh, this is a terrible sequence where I got snagged, actually. This is a performance issue. 0 out of 10. And the gameplay split had been 90% to 10%. I think that would have been interesting. I would have loved to see that. But also, I also just... They gave me a fan servicey little Leon game at the end. I'm fine with it. Yeah, look at this. Look at this! Look at this! I'm clipping through the car. This is ridiculous. And now I'm just waiting. This is so stupid. I think this is actually the run where I beat him in. Or it might not be, but I think it is. But yeah. Fun. Let's see. Mr. X is back. Oh, and when we're routing, away from here to the... actually, I think we missed it. But in the Kendo gun shop, we can loot the shotgun from the third game that was not in Resident Evil 3 Remake, but was in the original. So now, official canon, that shotgun is no longer absent in the world. We now know what happened to it. It was he took it with him when he went into visit that girl, and we can loot it. And it's a small thing. It's kind of a nothing thing. It's kind of like that extra L on the desk in Resident Evil 2 Remake, because in the original Resident Evil 2, the Welcome Leon message had 2 L's in welcome, and in Resident Evil 2 Remake, it's written correctly, but there's a small gap where another L could fit, and you can find that L on a desk. So it's like, okay, that's a fun thing. That shotgun, knowing where it is now, reincorporating it, it's fun. It means nothing, but it's still fun. It's, the game has a lot of reverence for the Resident Evil IP. Deep dive. Okay, so... Yeah, okay, so... This is just something I wrote out in full. I probably have touched on all of this, but let's see. The Raccoon City Leon section is just Resident Evil 4 action game again, but Resident Evil 4 action game is the gold standard for this sort of action game, so it's not exactly a bad thing. I think the early game gray sections are hands out the blowout portion of the game, but RE games are no strangers to front-loading quality. This might actually be the best I feel an RE game has done at end-game content, and solving for it by just wholesale swapping genre and playstyle, rather than building into it by gradually unlocking more weapons, is an interesting choice. I think maybe the original Resident Evil handled this the best now that I think about it. The rollicking, fast-paced action survival from beginning to end. That should have said, I think the original Resident Evil 3 handled this the best, now that I think about it, the rollicking, fast-paced action survival from beginning to end. But this is really good too. A game can do worse than have its second half be Resident Evil 4. And I guess I should caveat that as being Resident Evil 4 Remake. Because Resident Evil 4 is superior combat-wise to everything else. Not just in this franchise. Enemy designs are great in the Grace sections. In the Leon sections, they are actually sort of underwhelming, especially so when you consider Resident Evil 4 has probably the greatest set of enemies of any game ever made, and that inventiveness is really not on display here. There's also a lack of visual variety within enemies, or across enemies. Not the biggest issue in the world, but it seems like there might have only been one skin of each enemy type, such that I was often seeing the exact same enemy model twice in the same frame. It's not a massive issue, but it makes me wonder about the development of the Leon sequences. We know there used to be some sort of multiplayer, perhaps live service element to this game, and it would not surprise me if that part of the game was ultimately scrapped and recycled for the Leon sequences, and they maybe feel a bit underdeveloped because they are. For combat, we have the freehanding. So I talked about this on stream when I did the Resident Evil 4 stream, because there were in that trailer we saw Leon pick up the chainsaw, and I thought, is that a scripted sequence where we have a chainsaw, or can we actually just freehand stuff? And we can freehand stuff, but it's not nearly as elaborate as I imagined it could be, but it's still really fun. An enemy has a pipe or something, or an axe, you kill him, you can pick up the axe and immediately throw it into another enemy and stun them. That's great. On the Leon enemy sequences, they're not without expressiveness. There's those bloated guys with the pustules, shoot the pustules, you blow open the pustules, and if, it sprays blood everywhere, or like red mist. And if any enemy or corpse of an enemy is in that mist, they're brought back to life as Crimson Heads, or Pale Faces. I think they're called Crimson Heads. But yeah, so for the freehanding stuff, I can imagine a version of this game where the combat is a bit more expressive, and you go into an encounter, you see, okay, here's a guy with an axe, maybe I go for him first, or maybe I go for the shotgun guy, blow his legs out, he drops the chainsaw, and then I can just run towards the chainsaw, and then the enemies come towards me, walk into the chainsaw that's still active and spiraling on the ground, swiveling and going crazy, and I just like lure them into an environmental hazard. But I think maybe the Leon sequences are just a bit too fast paced for that sort of experimentation. And it might also be that on a third playthrough, I guess, that I will discover all of the hidden depth then. I kind of doubt it, since I didn't see much of it in my second time around, but whatever. Breaking the glass I thought was really fun. That would have been in the previous footage. Basically, you're on a collapsed skyscraper. You can shoot the windows that the enemies are walking on now because it's the floor, because it's tilted on its side. Blow the glass out underneath them and they collapse. That was fun. Inventive, but it's a really short sequence, and I'm kind of happy that it's short because that's something that probably could have worn out its welcome. And there's a great soldier enemy type who has a machine gun and will just randomly flail around his machine gun shooting into any direction. That's great. In the arc here, in the Leon sequence, right here, yeah, well, I don't know, not here, earlier, or maybe later. No, earlier. There's a sequence in the arc as Leon where you're fighting soldiers and you can release these guys, the lickers, to help you fight them. Again, it's not without emergent gameplay in the combat, but it's definitely more interesting to explore as Grace. And a lot of that maybe just comes down to that Leon can, by himself, just brute force his way through every enemy, so you don't need to experiment. Whereas with Grace, you know, your resources may not be enough to actually do this. So you have to think a little bit about it, and you have to get experimental and expressive. So yeah, it's disappointing that the game doesn't abide by RE2, original rules of special encounters and scenarios. Kill Chunk as Grace, you'll still need to kill him as Leon. Kill Chef as Grace, you'll still come to kill Grace when you're sniping enemies as Leon. We talked about this. Difficulty spikes, not really much to talk about there. I still haven't solved the puzzle of the hand, though I don't think that puzzle is gonna be like some great reveal. It's probably just extra fun. Oh, actually, I think people have solved it. Didn't they data mine that out? The cheaters. That goes against the entire spirit of the thing. So, yeah, future thoughts. The Leon section makes me a bit nervous about the future of the series because they have the capacity to dive into the best horror in AAA gaming, as we saw with Grace, and some of the best action. But since Resident Evil 1 Remake, they haven't, in my mind, really nailed a full game of the Grace section. And I wonder if the trick might just be as boring as to, like I said earlier, as to have there be a second puzzle box mansion to break through after completing the first one. Kind of like how Resident Evil 1 Remake, you have the mansion, then you have the cabin area. And, you know, it's not a puzzle box exactly, but it's still that sort of gameplay. And then you have the lab. And it's still always abiding by the rules of, you know, resource scarcity and such. I won't say the game is bad because it isn't longer, but I really wish there was more meat to it and that the character swaps would integrate choices a bit better into each other's storylines. This game is juggling a lot of balls and new experimental stuff, so that might be a big ask. It's not a 10 out of 10. Now, it's a 10 out of 10 without it, so we're just wishlisting right now, but I wonder what that could have looked like. So, yeah. Those are my notes and my sort of sporadic thoughts about the game. Comes with the highest possible recommendation I can give a game. I can give a AAA game. Let's be very careful here. But yeah, it's a shame this isn't just what video games are. Like, I don't want to be, I am cynical. I'm an asshole. I can be a total dick with this. Why is God of War not like this? Why does it have to be, you know, all of these Sony games that steal Resident Evil 4's presentation style, over-the-shoulder camera and all that? Why do they, like, they so freely pilfer from the presentation, but it's kind of like you're stealing my homework, but you need to show the work, and you didn't do that. You just showed the answer, and because you didn't do the work, you don't know what the value of that presentation was. Like, yeah, over-the-shoulder shooting, that worked, but also the reason my guy couldn't move was because there was a tension between me lining up a shot to kill the enemies and the enemy walking towards me slowly. This is original Resident Evil 4. And instead, these games just have that presentation, and then you do some barely interactive sequence, and then you watch a cutscene. And then you do another barely interactive sequence, and you watch another cutscene. And every single portion of the game feels exactly the same. And even though they do have a lot of variety in the gameplay, it doesn't feel that way because they format it around the exact same sort of activities. Oh my god, I'm Kratos, I'm the god of war, I can jump over mountains, but I guess I gotta go find a crate because I gotta find a stone to open a key because I can't just break that open. And you're like, wouldn't it be a much more fun game if you could do that? Like, I don't know. But yeah, this is what AAA gaming should be. And with that said, I'm gonna go into some of the comments. I posted out. Everybody in chat right now, give out some comments. I haven't been looking at chat much throughout this stream because I didn't want to break my focus too much. I'm not a native English speaker, so this is the part where my brain broke, where I explain it. That's so weak. No, I'm not a native English speaker, so these topics, they don't come into my head fully formed in English. I'm sort of translating it as I go. I hope I haven't been too disjointed. I know that it would be a much smoother listening experience if I were a native English speaker, but as I endeavor to do more of these sorts of I'm going to review a game by talking about it on stream if I find it interesting. I wish I had done this for Psychonauts 2, actually. But yeah, I endeavor to do more of these. As I do more of these, hopefully there's enough sort of plasticity left in my brain that I can learn to speak free-flowing English without a lot of just sort of hesitation. There I go. These hesitation phrases. But yeah, so comment in chat. I did a community post reaching out for people's thoughts, and I want to go into those now. So Michael said, one observation I'm interested in sharing is that Capcom seems to be doing this thing where the remakes are canon whenever they possibly can be. It's odd because the games up to 4 have been remade, but we can clearly see, even by just looking at Leon's face, that if a game has been remade, the remake is what's canon, even though 5 and 8 is also canon. And I think this is really interesting because Resident Evil 9 drops a major bombshell revelation about the development of Oswald Spencer as a character. And Resident Evil 5 remake, which I would imagine is coming, would either need to hide that away from the audience so that chronologically that isn't spoiled, or they can take that characterization transformation into account for the audience, and they can keep in mind that, okay, the connections go here and there's Xeno, and they can even start building up some of the revelations here in that game. But I think it's interesting that we have the franchises moving forwards in two different timelines at the same time, because chronologically the revelations made in later games are built on top of in subsequent games that happen earlier in the timeline. So if you play it chronologically, it's not going to be a clean shot straight through to the end. It's going to feel really weird, and revelations in one, like end game revelations, are going to be like, didn't they take that for granted in a game earlier? Or you play it by release date, in which case a lot of the character dynamics here that we take for granted are sort of not properly understood yet. And maybe that's a good reason for why, I'm thinking about it now, why it's Leon and not Jill. Because if they're going to remake Resident Evil 5, they may want to change some dynamics with Jill and Wesker, and they may not have wanted to spoil that by having her meet Xeno. That's interesting. But yeah, Michael, that's a really good one. I think that, I think 7 and 8 are also canon. I don't think they're going to be remaking those ones. But 5 and 6, I imagine both of them are on the remake list. And for a Resident Evil 6 remake, wouldn't I just love it if maybe the action sequences, like they did here, or like we pitched here, just small, 10-minute action sequences, and then you do more horror. And you don't have one campaign, another campaign, another campaign. You just merge it all into one campaign, but maybe pick, like, Sherry as one protagonist, and, I don't know, Chris or Ada or whatever as the other. Or maybe you have 3 protagonists and you just sort of juggle the story in. I don't know. A million different ways you can make it and have it be good. But yeah, it's a fun one, Michael. Thank you for that.
All right, Leon. Be careful.
We have Mauricio Blanco. It kind of feels like Q older games are only canon until they get a remake. There's a bunch of things the game omits or is ambiguous about, like Spencer's death. They mention in Grace's report Spencer died in his estate, but don't mention that Wesker killed him. Yeah, that is interesting. That might be that she doesn't know. They just find him dead there. But I would imagine, because didn't Wesker like punch his hand through his head or something? He didn't do that, but he was clearly like foul play dead. And you would feel like maybe that would have been, he was murdered, not he died in his estate. Or they're just going to change it. It could also be. And the Mean Gene. This is just my observation. It keeps getting me in trouble, as apparently I'm a jaded old man. But I've noticed the sequels, starting with 7, have long setups, and they're not getting any shorter. We're now, I talked about this earlier, but we're now realistically talking about a 30-minute introduction without gameplay. I'm not including the actual cutscenes either. And frankly, the initial Leon set piece where you're just chasing Gideon really feels like someone at Capcom noticed there's no combat for the first 5% of the game. I honestly think this game initially did not have Leon in it for the first hour. On its own, I wouldn't mind that. I obviously have some attachment to legacy characters, but I'm always willing to give new characters a chance, but the core gameplay keeps getting delayed. I find myself dreading a replay of 8 because of that first 25 minutes and the second level. Level in quotation mark. Yes. Honestly, I would, because this game we know was altered at like midway through development or something. They rebooted it. There was a multiplayer version of this game. So I don't know, like, was this 2 games that they glued together into one? Because the Grace game, I can't imagine is the multiplayer game they were talking about. For the life of me, I can't see how this is a multiplayer. So I would imagine if there was a multiplayer game, it's a live service game, you're a soldier, it's set in Raccoon City, and then they just reuse some of those map pieces or whatever, those assets, and that gameplay maybe. Like, I can imagine that having been the game, the multiplayer game that they sort of, reconfigured. But the Grace game is so much deeper and so much more fully thought out that I don't believe this was added in like last minute during development. We need to save the multiplayer action game, so let's just glue this into it. No, it much more feels to me like if these this feels like this was a game at some point. The Grace game was a game, and I would much rather believe that Leon was brought into that game rather than her having been invented in order to bring to the Leon game. And if that's the case, I wonder if these were 2 separate games that were merged together, and Grace just kind of got promoted into being the protagonist of Resident Evil 9 rather than being the protagonist of Resident Evil Outbreak 3 or Revelations 3 or Outbreak 2 or whatever. But yeah, also the opening to 8 is really sloppy. And the dollhouse. The dollhouse is another one of those sequences like the orphanage where, the dollhouse was great the first time. Really, good spooks, well designed, but man, I hated that. You hate that on a second playthrough because there's no choices anymore. It's just go from A to B to C to D to E, and it's just, you kind of want a button you can press at the beginning of the game that just skips all of that. And I guess such a button exists in just saving the game after that and replaying from that save file. But yeah, it is what it is. So chat, I wasn't expecting the discussion to happen so soon after the launch and RE4 stream. Of course. Hi, listening to your Dark Souls level design talk right now, and I'm really enjoying it so far. Thank you for enjoying it. The Dark Souls 2 level design discussion is up on Patreon, and I'll be recording. I did record one that I don't think is good enough for the channel because it is a lot of ums and uhs and justs and likes and me just not being in a good headspace. I think I was kind of tired when I recorded that, and I want to do a different one. I will release that one just on Patreon, but I'm going to do a real one that I have my A game on for the channel. And the Bloodborne level design discussion, I might solo that one like I did with Demon Souls, but I might also bring a guest. It kind of depends. I think the Grey sections cater to people who like the older, more horror exploration focused game. The Leon sections are for people who like the RE4 and action focused games. Yes. And honestly, like I said, I would have wanted the balance to be way more tipped towards Grace, but what I got, I was supremely satisfied with. Sometimes I think the pacing suffers a bit with the switching. I think that when they have extended gameplay sections, the pacing suffers. But when it was just like in the beginning half, when the Leon sections are 5-10 minutes long, I think it works really well. But when did the stream start? When you commented that, like 20 minutes ago, now like almost 2 hours ago. I guess he doesn't read chat. Well, I'm reading it now. I was just going through it all first. All my thoughts and such. It's first person and third person. Yes, it's first person and third person. I don't understand the whole Grace angle towards the end. It's pretty confusing. Yeah, we kind of discussed that. Especially when they keep saying she's just a normal woman. However, she doesn't get infected when she got bitten. Yeah, that one. See, that's another one of those contrivances where you think, she's infected now, so she has a reason to also be searching for a cure of some sort. But maybe she is the cure? Is she just immune? Because I believe Sherry was immune to everything in the 6th game. And then this game comes out and it's like, we're not bringing that up again. We've retconned that out of the franchise. But yeah. I think having to sacrifice whatever semblance of coherence in a story in order to get compelling, engaging gameplay is a false dichotomy. I think it doesn't matter I think it matters to the extent that you think it matters. And I think that, I think evaluating, I'm not, if Silent Hill did that, I would care. But Resident Evil, maybe it's just a looser tone, but I don't bring that same standard in. But, to each his own. I hope mosquitoes will go extinct. Oh, that. So we talked about, mosquitoes earlier. You hope they go extinct, but gosh, whatever comes after that might actually be worse, and there is no way of knowing. And anybody who pretends to know is pretending to know. You can't know. That's the hard thing about complicated systems. There's always a massive tail end blow up that you need to look out for, and they are not predictable. But I would hate mosquitoes, but we don't have those where I live, boy. The antiviral is for the T virus. There are other sorts of strains that are not based on it, including the whole mold thing. Okay, so they said it was just an antiviral. If it is only for the T virus, then that makes sense to how you build on top of the franchise. But she did say it's. Didn't she say like it's an antidote to? it renders all viral based warfare obsolete or something like that. But maybe I just misinterpreted it. They made his cheekbones wider and squished his eyes a bit. Is that it? Interesting. It's a world where you can parry a missile. I think they can come up with something. That's a good one, Cosmos. Resident Evil has always been stupid, so it's okay that this story made no sense. That's not what I said. You're being very disingenuous in that read of what I said. And that's also not what the complaint is. I don't think the story is stupid. I think there are contrivances. But the extent, do you bring this exact same energy in when you watch The Terminator and when you watch RoboCop? Because, do you sit there and go, that's not very realistic. In reality, this is what would happen. And, it sure is convenient that this character happened to know that this was, I don't know. I feel like nobody actually does that. But, you can sort of, I guess maybe, I don't know. I certainly don't do that. It's the body horror franchise, yes. Well, I wouldn't even say it's the body horror franchise. When I think body horror, I think much more about, The Fly, David Cronenberg's The Fly. It's this sort of, I'm changing. There's things, operations within me over which I have no control over, but which are essentially still core to me, are altering what I am. And, it's just this horror, it's this horror of losing yourself. That's what, I'm being a pedant right now. I'm being pedantic with definitions. God help me, how pathetic am I? But that, it's more just bio-horror. It's more the threat of mutated flesh. Because, body horror, I'm being pedantic, I know, but to me, body horror really has that added tinge of, it's the processes within yourself that and your own sort of unbecoming. But yeah, I'm being a pattern. The introduction of the spider was very Return of the King-esque. Why do people keep asking for open world games? I'm so exhausted by it. I assume that's in reference to me talking about an open world exploration of Raccoon City. Yeah, I also think a lot of open world games would be much better if they didn't have the open world. But what I'm talking about there is not an open world sandbox game, or even areas as open as we see in this one. When I was talking about an open world, more explorable Resident Evil, I was more talking about you take the sort of puzzle box Spencer Mansion progression layout, and you just format the city to fit into that. So it's not an endlessly explorable city with a bunch of dead ends and such. It is more linear. Maybe it has a couple of branching paths at some points, but it's the puzzle box framed as a city, but still very much a puzzle box. This is nowhere near a 10 out of 10. I mean, people differing opinions. That's fine. Not a pinnacle of the medium either. I don't know. I think a lot of this game is really, really, really good. It's supposed to be survival horror. Are you suggesting it's the pinnacle of survival horror? I think the Grace section is pretty high up there. I don't know if people keep asking for it as much, but the open world. But it's true that it's became a collateral industry standard. The more better philosophy from AAA industry. Kind of tired of it too. Yeah, the open world. Yeah. People see a sort of thing, and they become really infatuated with that thing. And it's kind of like we were talking about earlier with the over-the-shoulder camera perspective from Resident Evil 4. A lot of developers saw that and became infatuated with it, and a lot of players too, but the actual deeper-rooted reasons for that presentation format were not as clearly embraced. And so you got a lot of those sorts of over-the-shoulder shooters that had no business actually abiding by that presentation format. So yeah. Scrolling down. I'm an OG fan, so Ari has been dead since Resident Evil 4 to me. But it's okay. These games aren't made for fans like me anyway. I just like Acer's take on the medium. That's fine. And yeah, like that is also sort of the sad thing about this. And Melvin Wiggins. I am a big fan of all of these franchises that blew up and became these sorts of blockbuster crowd pleasers. I'm a big fan of all of them re-examining, like Resident Evil this game is going to make $1 billion. I'm sure, can't Capcom put a couple of those millions into another tank control survival horror one? You know, it's the same, like, why can't they make isometric Fallouts just for, like, the old school fans? Why can't they do that for the Elder Scrolls? You know, why, or Final Fantasy? Why can't we have pixel art SNES inspired Final Fantasy games that are smaller and don't cost $400 million to produce? But yeah, that's always, as a Silent Hill fan, that's always sort of, I feel that pain too, because I am never, ever getting a Silent Hill game that I love again. But he's not even Wesker though, it's not even the same guy, so even if it was Jill or Chris, it would be like, I don't even know who you are moment from a dumb moment from Avengers Endgame. Yeah, but it's Wesker's voice actor, and he's like a clone of Wesker. So it's like, you know, something could have been done with that moment. But maybe you don't do anything with that moment because they're cooking something up. The attic, the anti-basement is called the attic. There's a note you can find that says there are 2 chunks. They're brothers. Oh, okay then. But wait, I killed Chunk as Leon, and then when I go back to Grace, I didn't encounter Chunk again. Was I just really lucky in my routing because I looted everything that was left in there, or did he? So he didn't despawn when I killed him as Leon. Okay. People talking about open world games. Yeah, the midwit loves a buzzword game. But the thing about the midwit, we mustn't hate on the midwit too much. It's not his fault. The midwit is only ever going to repeat what marketing tells him to repeat. If marketing tells him that if marketing sells him on, it's a big open world, then the midwit goes, I love open world, I'm gonna play this. If the midwit is told, look at the graphics, the midwit is gonna be like, oh, I love graphics. You know, the midwit is just gonna repeat whatever he's told. He doesn't have a mind, it doesn't matter. But that's why it's so important that we just bulldoze higher quality. There was 10, 15 years ago, I distinctly remember you would be talking about PlayStation games and people would go, what about the frame rate? You know, playing these games, it's kind of rough because they run on such shit frame rate. And people would go, oh, who cares about frame rate anyway? That was the mainstream position. I remember Metal Gear Rising Revengeance came out, and a lot of, half the reviews will talk about that game as looking a bit archaic. You know, it doesn't meet the standards of today. But some reviews were like, oh yeah, it runs at 60 frames per second on console. By God, it plays so good. And basically, higher, frame rate only matters in games where reaction timing and pinpoint aiming is relevant. In something like Silent Hill 1, frame rate really doesn't matter. I mean, higher frame rate is better. Functionally, I think artistically, you could probably make some edge case for lower frame rates, but yeah. So higher frame rates, that's not a position the industry came to after marketing sat down and decided they really needed to do that. That's a position the industry was basically bullied into, and so If Sony, I've talked a lot about this recently, if Sony decided to market their games as, look at how expressive, how innovative, how engaging, and how dynamic all of these systems are, I think the Sony fanboy overnight would just stop talking about graphics and immediately they'd be like, oh, our games are defined by being really innovative and expressive and dynamic. And it's just like a flip would be switched. A switch would be flipped. So again, you must recognize the midwit. You must not hate the midwit. How old is Grace? Yeah, that's a good question. Because there are clones of her that, like I said, they're like 5 years old in 1990 when that flashback took place. That flashback. Where it at? Where it at? Is it here somewhere? No. No, here she's just watching the scene. Maybe it was in the previous video. Maybe I'm too late. No, there it is. Where is it? Hide from the children. Okay, so many failures. 2007, 2005. Such a waste. And here the scene plays out.
What do you mean?
They wanted to duplicate you, lady. I think we have a timestamp on the flashback sequence even. 1990. She's clearly like 5 years old. Let's assume she's born 1985. If Grace is the original, like I'm pretty sure they say she is, but maybe I'm wrong about that. That would make her, this game takes place in like 1930 or like 2030. And if Grace is the original, that would make her in her 40s. But she's clearly in her 20s. So, like, I don't know. I imagine there is an answer. Maybe her cells were perfected in 1985, but she wasn't actually created. I think, there is an answer, because she met with Oswald Spencer, I think in 2005, and then he has Grace as a baby. So yes, he's probably like 25, 26. Meaning she's born after the other ones. Maybe she's like another experiment, but she was just normal. People complaining about the length, not including the fact that RE games are also very replayable. I consider it to be silly given what a complete package Requiem is. Yes, like I said, I'm going to be replaying the first half of Requiem often.
Shit.
I don't know about the second half quite as much. I imagine I'll give it a few more goes, but I would have really liked it if the Leon sequences had that extra bit of, because just outside of being well designed and playing well, I don't find there's a lot of replayability in the Leon sections. Yeah, Silent Hill Remake could have been much shorter. They stretched the 4-hour game into like 12 hours. Oof. Scrolling down. Grace's boss basically pressuring her into investigate the place where her mother was murdered was so jarring that I thought he was part of a conspiracy for most of the game. Yeah, hey, that guy kind of sucks, huh? You feel like he'd be... Yeah, it's like, Grace, I think he even says this to her, Grace, it's time for you. Maybe it's time you face the past. You go, what kind of relationship do we have where you tell me what I need to do? Who the hell do you think you are, you asshole? My mother was murdered in cold blood in front of me. I have trauma. I saw another man had his throat slit. It was a horrifying experience for me. And you're sending me back there with no backup? Are you crazy? And yeah, maybe in a rewrite you go, okay, what if Leon escorts her? And then they get separated. I don't know. Off topic, we joke about Kagure being a staple meme in the channel, but the healing grass propaganda is also up there. Oh, Kagure is very apt for Resident Evil. How many centipede enemies have we had in there? Do you guys remember Mendez? When his like body stretched out and he was a giant centipede man? That's Kagure. Healing grass. Ah, is that relevant to Resident Evil at all? Huh? Healing grass is great. I thought the twist was that Grace wasn't special at all. Zeno and Gideon got Spencer's notes all wrong. Yeah, I think Zeno got it wrong. Did Gideon get it wrong too? I feel like didn't he know at the end? That's like, nope. You know, it's just that's his personal motivations were strange and obtuse to me, where he's just in reverence of his master Spencer, and he wants anarchy? ? But also,
This must be the room.
does he want Elpis because Elpis is an end to bioterrorism? So how exactly is like it's gonna upturn the world order? It's probably going to stabilize things a lot that you don't have like rogue agents pumping life-destroying bio weapons into the atmosphere. Like, how would it destabilize the world? Or like, which power players there are? Again, I don't think so. I think you take bio weapons off the table. You take them off the table for everyone. I don't think anybody has a specific advantage because of this that wouldn't have the same advantage without them. It's kind of like nuclear weapons, where if nuclear weapons didn't exist, it probably would still just be the same countries being the most powerful ones, but and again, no, like, they're kind of a big game changer. Not to get too deep into that, but like, Gideon's motivations kind of seemed weird to me. But yeah, that's Resident Evil Requiem review. Again, I'm terribly sorry if my stream of consciousness here was a bit rambly, if it was a bit unfocused. And as we make more of these, eventually I'll become good at it. I eventually became kind of good at editing videos, I hope. Hopefully I'll become good at speaking without a script in front of me.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, chat. This was fun. It was a fun way to spend a couple of hours, but all things must come to an end. See you all later. Unless you have anything to add right here at the final seconds. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. I hope you have an awesome sauce day. I've been having just a day. Sometimes you just have a day, you know? Sometimes a day is just a day. It's a neutral day. Kind of shitty weather outside. Actually, I got a package sent to me earlier by UPS. It's a dollhouse I bought for the girlfriend, the woman. Because she has she does art with Barbie dolls. It's like trap house Barbie dolls. She did art projects like that, and she's been talking about wanting to get back into that. So I was like, I'll buy you an actual big, like, wooden dollhouse. So I got on Etsy and I picked out a really beautiful one. She doesn't watch these streams, and none of you is allowed to find out who she is in real life and message her to spoil the gift for her. It's meant to be a surprise. But yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks everybody for watching. Bye bye.